Dan Orlovsky joins us each week courtesy of mybookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at mybookie.ag. Audience member Dan proposed a trade to us, and we would like your thoughts on it. Lance, as you know, is a Rams fan. I, as you know, am a Dolphins fan. You told me last week in this very spot. You told me last week at this very spot, I don't like what's going to happen to your Dolphins tonight. You undersold it to me, Dan. It could not have gone worse. You weren't bad enough.
Sorry.
So it's okay. It's not your fault. Here's the trade.
Here's the trade proposal. And I think you were like me, Dan. Like, once Bryce Young was benched, I didn't know if there was going to be another opportunity for him in Carolina. It's just such an awkward situation. Now Carolina's saying they're not interested in trading. We've heard that before. And then, 6 hours later, the guy's gone. Here's the trade proposal. The Rams get Bryce Young.
Okay.
The Dolphins get Matthew Stafford. And the Panthers get a second round this year from the Dolphins and a third round from the Rams.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely moronic from the Rams' standpoint. I mean, I'm not certainly giving away a third round pick and Matthew Stafford for Bryce Young. I think taking Bryce, if you're the Rams and trying to trade for Bryce and maybe like a 6th round pick or a 7th round pick for Bryce Young, then I can have the conversation. I think the starting point for this is all, if like from the Rams' perspective, what's the inside information about the injuries? Because if the injuries are as bad when it comes to the interior of the offensive line, like, hey, those guys are out for the next 2 months, and Puka and Cooper, I think then that's worth them sitting down and having the conversation of, can they trade Matthew Stafford or should they? So, but it all comes down to that information. The second part is Carolina willing to trade Bryce Young for pennies on the dollar? I think they should. I think that he should try to get out of there as soon as possible. And I do like the fact of trying to get him to a Miami or a Los Angeles Rams, but the Rams aren't giving Stafford away and a 3rd round pick for Bryce Young. That would be the dumbest thing ever.
How long do you think? Look, and this is the last contract. I know they renegotiated right before camp, and I think he's getting right around $40 million. But this is his last year of guaranteed money. How much longer do you think he plays? And I know a lot of this is based on what you said with the interior of that offensive line. Like, he can't continue to get beat to hell and back and lose game after game and think he's going to come back next year. Like, do you think he's got this year and one more? Is this it? Maybe 3 more?
Yeah, I would have bet comfortably that this year for sure and probably next year. It felt like this year was almost, I don't want to say an all-in year for both him and Sean McVay, but it felt like they were going to be as good as like anybody in the NFC and believe that team could go and win a championship. And this was like the year that they were going to kind of put all their chips in the basket, so to speak. And as the trade deadline came, if they were playing really good and in that conversation, I would have expected them to be aggressive and make a move for a player. Again, I think now those injuries put a lot of that into flux because they've just been absolutely decimated. But I do think he's got 2 really good years of football left at a minimum.
Dan Orlovsky with us, courtesy of mybookie.ag, code next round. Would it make sense for Miami to make a move for Bryce Young if, in fact, they would unload him? I mean, nobody needs a better backup more than Miami does as much as Tua is hurt. It's a lot of Alabama quarterbacks on one team. I get it. But, I mean, a fresh start for him, that might work in Miami.
That's the team that makes a ton of sense. So this is why a lot of teams do in the draft process their evaluations on quarterbacks, even though they might not be selecting a quarterback at the place where like these guys are most likely to get drafted, because you just never know. So part of this, what did Miami think of Bryce Young and Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer? What did they think of Bryce Young coming out of college in their evaluation? So yes. And then the second thing is, if you look at the skill sets or the traits that are displayed by Tua, and some of the ones that you, at least I think Bryce has, is like, you see quick processing, you see a lightning quick release, you see a really high end ball placement and throwing across the middle of the field. Like, I do think that he can do those things. That's part of the reason why I'm so surprised it failed so drastically this season. But Miami makes a lot of sense. Now, part of that again is, what's the financial commitment for the future to Tua? And there's a lot of unknown attached to that situation still.
Dan Orlovsky is with us. We appreciate Rusty on social media for that question about the trade there, putting that together for us. Tonight, Aaron Rodgers tries to put together a 2-game Jets win streak in a short week. What do you think of Aaron so far, and what does the future of this season look like for him, in your opinion?
I was really encouraged by both him and the offense's performance in week 2. I felt they were fine in week 1 as well. I think they found a little bit of an identity last week, got into a lot of empty sets, 5 guys out in the pass concept. They ran the ball in outside zone, which was nice. I think Aaron's made some throws that are just marvelous. They look like vintage Aaron. Last week 1 to Allen Lazard, last week to Garrett Wilson a couple of times. The 3rd and 1 to Garrett Wilson against Tennessee last week is off the charts. So very encouraged by the way the offensive line is protected 2 weeks in a row. Very encouraged by the way Aaron's made some big time throws. I think that they found a little bit of what they can be. And I've said this. If we remember when Tom went down to Tampa, what they really started to live in was spreading people out, playing shotgun football and being empty because 1, they could protect. 2, Tom just saw everything so quickly and they had matchups and the ball came out quick. Now, I do think you want to see Mike Williams, who they traded for from the Chargers, who's coming off the ACL. If he can get to like a really healthy place, I really believe this offense can be a very difficult matchup for a lot of teams.
No disrespect to Josh Allen against the Cardinals in week 1 or Geno Smith last week in the overtime win against the Patriots, but the best quarterback play I've seen in one game through 2 weeks was Kyler Murray last week against the Rams. I mean, Dan, he played like an MVP. If he plays at that level, this Arizona team is not going to be good. They will be competing for a championship.
Yeah, it's the best game I've seen Kyler play. I said that I thought his game on Sunday was top 5 player in the league type of stuff, not quarterback in the league type of stuff. He made some jaw-dropping plays that, only a handful of guys can make, some of the runaround plays. I thought he played unbelievably clean from the pocket, getting through progressions, making some really tight throws over the top of some defenders. So I think, they're a really interesting team because the interior of their offensive line just wants to physically harm you, beat you up. James Conner is a violent back, and they do a nice job running inside. They've got 2 or 3 tight ends that they put on the field. Marvin Harrison took a jump last week. I don't know how much confidence I have in the defense, to play at a high level on a consistent basis. But, man, if they get that version of Kyler, Kyler will be in the MVP conversation for sure.
Dan, nobody has looked better through 2 weeks than the New Orleans Saints. They get the wounded Eagles, who have got to be spinning after that collapse on Monday night. Are these Saints for real? Are we buying Confederate money here with the Saints?
Yeah, they're for real. Their offensive line is really good. They're in a perfect scheme. Clint Kubiak running that zone scheme. They're really good when it comes to, I think, those 2 receivers, Olave and Shaheed. Shaheed's a vertical threat, but so is Chris Olave. Olave's great in the possession game. Kamara's fantastic. So I love the offensive scheme. I think it's the offensive scheme that is probably the best to be running in the NFL right now for the most part. I think they got 3 stars on their defensive side and all at a level. You can make the case multiple. I mean, Lattimore's coming back at corner, but Honey Badger still looks great. Demario Davis is as good a backer as we have. Cam Jordan playing a high level. So, I think the Saints are for real. I really do.
I'm a Buccaneers fan, but I'm going to skip over the fact that we're 2-0 and ask you a Buccaneer question. I'll go flip to the 0-2 Baltimore Ravens. Where are they going, Dan? What have you seen that has them at 0-2?
Yeah, I mean, their offensive line is not nearly what it has been in the past, certainly decades, but the past 4 or 5 years. The right side of their offensive line is really struggling, and that's, Max Crosby basically ended the football game, and that's how the Raiders won. So they got issues trying to, protect and run the football. I think they're also trying to figure out who they are on offense. Derrick Henry, Lamar, are they going to be more throw-centric, run-centric? What kind of formations can they get in with Derrick? So they're still trying to figure that out. And then, their defense, you don't lose Jadeveon Clowney and Patrick Queen and Mike McDonald. Those are really important pieces. Geno Stone, they lost really important pieces on their defense, and they just haven't found their footing in that group yet. I think they do, but it's not going to be the number 1 defense in football like it was last year.
Did you ever have a receiver in your career, high school, college, or pro, that loved to go catch a football no matter what it took, like Nico Collins is doing for C.J. Stroud? Did you ever have anyone that had your back like Nico has C.J. Stroud?
I mean, I don't know how I dumbed into that life in football. I didn't get a ton of opportunity to start, but I played on teams with Calvin Johnson. I played on teams with Reggie Wayne. I played on teams with, rest in peace, Vincent Jackson. I played on teams with Andre Johnson. Like, I played on some teams that were just absolutely loaded. All four of those guys were Hall of Fame type of talents for sure. So yeah, Nico's a number one. Like, Nico's absolutely becoming an elite wide receiver.
All right, before you go, we read your tweet earlier with an amazing set of statistics that show that offense has, in a lot of ways, disappeared this year in the NFL in the passing game. Why is that? Can you put a finger on why those stats that you sent out this morning exist?
Yeah, number one, the athletic element of quarterback play and wide receiver play. Teams are trying to create a defense that minimizes explosive plays at a premium. Number two, the rules of football. You can't hit receivers more than 5 yards downfield. You can't hit them crossing the field. So it promotes the passing game. So defenses are going to say, well, we're going to counter the promotion of the passing game. We're trying to minimize the pass. I think offensive line play is not nearly as good as it used to be. And so when teams are lining up with these certain too high defenses that aren't new, they're just doing it a lot. The only way is you have to run them out of it because of numbers. You have to bring a safety down to the football, or to throw it really well, you have to play action because you have to move people on the defense. And there's not a ton of teams that are committed and capable of doing that.
They better watch out because that running back stock had dropped. They're going to have to start paying running backs. They're going to have to start paying running backs again if they keep doing this.
Back,
Running backs love that.
Like bell bottoms and plaid, man. Here come the running backs.
At Dan Orlovsky 7 is where you follow him on social media. You see him all week on ESPN. Thank you for the time, Dan. Safe travels. We'll see you next week.
Have a great weekend, fellas.
All right, buddy. You too. Dan Orlovsky with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.